When Ethan Hale hit send on his resignation email, he caught the faint upward tug at the corner of Derek Howard's mouth. It was a minuscule curve, hidden behind a pressed, neutral lip, but Ethan saw it clearly. 5 years trapped in this high-pressure downtown advertising firm had honed his ability to read micro-expressions into an involuntary, razor-sharp skill, forged not by natural talent, but by years of quiet survival in a cutthroat corporate environment where misreading your superior could end your career overnight. Derek's reply landed in his inbox less than a second later. Understood. Expedite the handover. 7 words. Not even a closing period to punctuate the end of 5 years of sleepless nights, crisis damage control, client breakthroughs, and uncredited labor. Half a decade of professional dedication condensed into 7 cold, dismissible syllables. Ethan stared at the line for 3 seconds, his chest tightening with a muted, familiar weariness, before he closed the email tab without reply. He folded his hands atop his scuffed desk, breathed out slowly, and began drafting the handover checklist. There was no anger, no dramatic defiance, only the quiet discipline he had mastered over half a decade. Anger left traces, discipline left none, and traces were the last thing he could afford right now. The department meeting that afternoon turned his quiet exit into a public humiliation, deliberate and unapologetic. Derek sat at the head of the glossy conference table, his complexion ruddy with quiet triumph, and announced Ethan's departure in a tone so light it could have been reading the daily weather forecast for downtown Manhattan. Ethan is moving on to pursue personal career growth, Derek announced, his gaze sweeping the silent room to enforce his control. All his client portfolios will be fully transferred to Carter Reed. Carter's young, but he's got raw instinct, picks up complex campaign work faster than anyone on the senior team. Carter sat in the workstation directly across from Ethan's, his chin tilted upward in unmasked arrogance, a smug smirk playing on his lips. A recent 23-year-old graduate with a degree in broadcast media, he had been slipped into the firm 3 months prior courtesy of his maternal uncle, Derek himself. He could barely define what a creative brief entailed, confused customer ROI with social media engagement reach, and still struggled to distinguish brand positioning from generic ad copy. Yet now, he was about to occupy the seat Ethan had molded over 5 years. That seat. The ergonomic leather chair Ethan had occupied since his first promotion, its armrests polished smooth from thousands of hours of palm pressure, its seat cushion permanently molded to the curve of his hips from endless overtime days. Carter sank into it now, tilting the recliner halfway back with a lazy push, his body language screaming that he intended to coast on unearned privilege from day one. 7 other team members filled the conference room. Some twisted their pens between nervous fingers, others stared vacantly out the floor-to-ceiling glass at the city skyline. No one spoke up. Not out of apathy, but fear. Derek was the client services director, the sole arbiter of everyone's performance reviews, annual raises, promotion eligibility, and even quarterly bonus payouts. His management role was brutally simple: obedience above all else. Disobey, and you ended up exactly where Ethan was now, pushed out, discarded, erased without acknowledgement. Ethan's eyes drifted across the faces of his silent colleagues. Former interns he'd mentored through their first high-stakes client calls, copywriters he'd collaborated with on award-winning national campaigns, account partners who'd pulled all-nighter after all-nighter beside him to rescue doomed last-minute launches. Not a single one met his gaze. He understood perfectly. Everyone had a livelihood to protect, a mortgage to pay, a family to feed. No one could afford to burn bridges for a man already walking out the door. He cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the thick, awkward silence of the room. Director Howard, I've finalized the full handover checklist. If permitted, I'd like to walk Carter through the portfolio privately to cover the unrecorded nuanced details not listed in the formal server documents. His offer was entirely sincere. No matter how ugly his exit became, Ethan refused to leave his life's work in disarray. Every client relationship in his portfolio had been built from cold calls, late-night negotiations, and crisis resolutions he'd navigated single-handedly. Even as he departed, he could not bear to watch those carefully cultivated partnerships be destroyed by youthful ignorance and managerial incompetence. Derek waved a hand dismissively before Ethan finished speaking, the gesture lazy and condescending. No need for all that trivial fluff. The official server files are sufficient. Carter's sharp, he'll get up to speed in no time. Just wrap up your remaining administrative loose ends. You don't need to concern yourself with core client matters anymore. Loose ends. The word landed softly, yet it reverberated through the room like a gunshot. Martha Gaines, the senior creative lead seated in the corner who had worked alongside Ethan for 4 years, lifted her head. Her lips parted as if to protest, to correct the blatant injustice of reducing 5 years of core client leadership to menial admin work, but she pressed them shut again. She had 2 children in private school and a husband on long-term critical medical leave. She could not afford to clash with Derek and risk her family's stability. Ethan merely nodded, his expression impassive. Understood. I will finalize all pending tasks and complete the handover promptly by end of week. He did not look angry, not even remotely. A stranger would have thought him indifferent to the public degradation, the deliberate erasure of his professional legacy. Derek, pleased by his docility and lack of pushback, graced the room with uncharacteristic pleasantries. Ethan has contributed solid foundational work over the years, and we do appreciate his efforts. HR will order premium coffee and pastries on his last day, a small formal send-off for his tenure. A corporate coffee run. A token farewell. 5 years of foundational work building the firm's most profitable client vertical. Ethan smiled then, a faint, almost imperceptible upturn of his lips. Later, when he replayed the moment alone in his apartment, he would wonder how he had managed it. There was no bitterness in that smile, no forced politeness. It was quiet, knowing amusement. Because he understood the truth no one else in that room could see, this humiliating performance was only the opening act. Derek thought he was the director of the stage, pulling all the strings and writing the narrative. But he had never read the full script Ethan had been crafting for 2 years. When the meeting adjourned, Ethan returned to his workstation to begin packing his personal belongings. Stacked neatly beside his monitor were 3 piles of industry annuals, each page annotated with color-coded sticky notes marking campaign wins, granular client feedback, and emerging market trend insights he'd compiled across half a decade. The tall Sansevieria plant in the corner had been purchased on his first day at the firm, a tiny 3-leaf sprig that had grown into 2 full, lush specimens over 5 years, its leaves thick and glossy from years of his consistent watering and care. Deep in his locked desk drawer lay a black leather notebook, its pages densely filled with handwritten notes no official company document would ever contain. He'd cataloged every granular detail of his client network, which marketing directors preferred pour-over coffee during in-person meetings, which brand vice president had a child entering college that calendar year, the exact number of approval stages for each client's budget pipeline, which legal teams were notoriously rigid and required 2 weeks of preemptive scheduling to avoid delays. None of this relational data existed in the centralized company servers. Yet, this invisible, human-centric knowledge was the real reason he had maintained flawless retention for 37 key clients across 5 turbulent industry years. He hefted the notebook in his palm for a moment, feeling the weight of 5 years of unrecorded labor and quiet wisdom. He did not place it in the cardboard box with his plants and books. Instead, he slipped it into the hidden inner sleeve of his waterproof laptop bag, where it would remain secure and unseen. Chloe Bennett, a junior account executive who had joined the firm 2 years prior through campus recruitment, lingered by his desk on the pretense of walking to the break room for water. She had been Ethan's first mentee, learning the fundamentals of client communication, crisis management, and campaign execution directly under his guidance. She was the closest thing he had to a protege in the entire office, and the only colleague unafraid to show her true feelings. "Ethan," she whispered, leaning in to avoid nearby ears, her voice tight with frustration, "you're really just letting this happen? Those clients are yours, you built every single relationship. Carter can't even calculate basic ROI margins. How is this remotely fair?" Ethan adjusted the Sansevieria carefully into the cardboard box, his fingers brushing the sturdy, waxy leaves. "It's fair by the only rule that matters in this building," he replied quietly, his tone devoid of emotion. "His last name is Howard." Chloe's face twisted with helpless frustration. "And you're just going to walk away without fighting back at all?" "I'm not fighting for what's already mine," Ethan said, closing the box flaps gently. "What belongs to me will find its way back. What doesn't was never worth keeping in the first place." Chloe studied his face intently, searching for the anger, resentment, or grief that should have lingered beneath his calm surface. But she found none. There was only a strange, quiet anticipation in his eyes, a quiet certainty she could not name or comprehend. She would not understand what that guarded look meant until 3 days later, when the entire carefully constructed facade of Derek Howard's corporate empire crumbled to irreversible ruin. Dusk had painted the city skyline deep indigo by the time Ethan carried his cardboard box out of the 40-story glass high-rise. Early autumn hung in the crisp air, carrying the sweet, subtle fragrance of osmanthus blossoms from the street-level planters lining the sidewalk. He paused on the concrete curb for 5 full minutes, staring up at the 18th floor where he had spent half his professional life. 5 years ago, on his first day of work, this building had seemed towering, brilliant, limitless with professional promise. Now it was just another drab glass and steel monolith, ordinary, unremarkable, and hollow at its core. He pulled out his phone and sent a short, pre-drafted message to a number he had saved 2 years prior, an encrypted contact he had never used until that exact moment. "The stage is set. We can begin." The reply arrived instantly, typed with practice speed, "Waiting for you. What time tomorrow?" 2 p.m. sharp. Bring the finalized partnership agreement." He deleted the entire message thread permanently, flagged down a yellow taxi cruising the avenue, and gave the driver an address in the heart of the financial district, the 28th floor of a premium Class A office tower overlooking the river. This was the headquarters of Vanguard Interactive, a marketing agency incorporated just 2 months prior under a low-profile parent shell company. Its founder was Alara Voss. Alara Voss, once the youngest regional vice president at a top global 4A advertising group, had broken away 3 years prior with a core team of senior executives to launch her own boutique agency specializing in full-spectrum marketing for emerging consumer brands. In 3 short years, she had grown Vanguard's annual revenue to $70 million, outpacing industry growth rates by nearly double digits through data-driven strategy and hyper-personalized client partnership. Exactly the philosophy Ethan embodied. She had also been Ethan's first direct supervisor when he graduated college and entered the industry as a nervous junior account executive. Back then, when Alara left the 4A firm to launch her risky startup, she had asked Ethan to join her as a founding team member. He had hesitated, still early in his career at 25, untested and afraid of the financial risk inherent to a fledgling business with no guaranteed client roster. Alara had not pressured him, only left the door open with a quiet, memorable promise. "Whenever you're ready to stop working for others and build something your own, my offer stands." That waiting period had stretched across 2 long years. In those 2 years, Ethan had joined his current firm, crossed paths with Derek Howard, and endured a 5-year battle of attrition that chipped away at his patience, his optimism, and his faith in corporate fairness. Meanwhile, Vanguard Interactive had exploded into an industry powerhouse, faster and more formidable than any market analyst had predicted. 1 month prior, Alara had sent him a single message that changed everything. "My client roster is overflowing, and I need someone who understands relationship capital as well as you do. Come join me as a founding partner. Not as a salaried employee, as a co-builder with equity and voting rights." Ethan had not replied immediately. He knew exactly what intangible assets he held, and precisely when to deploy them for maximum strategic impact. Before Derek's nepotistic power play ran its full course, he needed to remain in his seat, complete his tenure, and position all his hidden pieces on the corporate chessboard. Now, the timing was perfect. Inside Vanguard's minimalist glass and steel break room, Alara slid a formal equity agreement across the quartz countertop toward him. She wore no makeup, her dark hair cut into a sharp, sleek bob, and a tailored charcoal blazer that gave her the quiet, contained menace of a razor locked safely in its sheath. Her gaze was sharp, analytical, missing no detail. Equity stake, 15%, vesting over 3 years with a 12-month cliff, she stated, her tone crisp and purely businesslike. Title: Co-founder and Chief Client Officer. Base salary is 50% of what you're earning now, but annual performance dividends, based on our projected growth rate, will triple your current total compensation package this fiscal year. Ethan scanned the legal document for 10 seconds, skipping the standard non-compete fine print, and signed his name at the bottom without hesitation or second thought. Alara watched the ink dry on the page, her gaze narrowing slightly. Your termination contract contains a non-compete clause, correct? It does, Ethan confirmed, folding the agreement closed and tucking it into his bag. 2-year prohibition against joining direct competitor firms and actively poaching existing clients from my former employer. Alara arched an eyebrow, a faint knowing smirk tugging at her lips. Then what exactly are you doing sitting across from me as my new co-founder, legally speaking? Simple corporate law, Ethan replied, lifting his pour-over coffee mug to take a slow, thoughtful sip. Vanguard's core vertical is emerging consumer brand full-spectrum marketing. My former firm specializes exclusively in automotive and home appliance industrial campaigns. Our client pools have zero overlap. We are not legal direct competitors. Furthermore, this agreement makes me an equity partner with governance rights, not a salaried at-will employee. The non-compete governs employment relationships, not equity holdings in a non-competing entity. Alara stared at him for 3 full seconds, then laughed a low, genuine sound of admiration. You're far more calculating and legally precise than I gave you credit for. That's the only lesson this 5-year corporate purgatory taught me, Ethan said quietly. When you operate inside a system that bends its own rules to favor the powerful, your only reliable defense is to be smarter than the rulebook itself. He pulled the black leather notebook from his laptop bag and set it on the counter between them. 15 core clients from my old portfolio. 5 have unbreakable personal loyalty to me and will initiate formal rebid processes within the next 24 months, regardless of agency performance. 4 brand directors are already deeply dissatisfied with Derek's reckless leadership and have been waiting over a year for a viable alternative agency partner. The rest are in a holding pattern, but my departure will trigger their internal relationship review protocols imminently. We're entering October now, the annual budget planning window for consumer brands, the 2-month critical period when agencies win or lose yearly framework contracts that define annual revenue. Alara flipped open the notebook, her eyes scanning the densely packed, categorized pages. It contained far more than basic client contact information. Ethan had mapped the decision-making hierarchy of every brand team, psychological profiles of each key stakeholder, communication preferences, personal hobbies, and intimate family details that never appeared in corporate CRM systems. A beauty brand CFO navigating a bitter, prolonged divorce, a beverage brand VP who led a weekend elite business school running club, a maternity brand founder who visited a private indoor swimming facility every Wednesday with her young toddler. These human details were worthless in formal corporate documentation. In the high-stakes, relationship-driven world of advertising client retention, they were irreplaceable, priceless leverage. How did you gather all this confidential personal context over the years? Alara asked, her tone quiet with awe. For 100-plus business dinners over 5 years, Ethan answered simply. Countless after-hours emergency calls, client retreats, holiday parties, and small personal favors, large and small. Derek dismisses all of this as trivial, intangible fluff. He has never understood the core truth of our industry. Written client contracts are temporary, renewable, disposable. Trust and relational capital are the real bedrock of every long-term partnership. Alara closed the notebook, her expression sharpening into focused resolve. What's your execution plan? That 2-month window is narrower than industry headlines make it sound. I don't need 2 months, Ethan said, holding up 3 fingers. I only need 3 days. Derek and Carter will destroy the client relationships for us entirely of their own accord, without any intervention from my side. You're that certain of their self-destruction? Carter is the most incompetent handoff successor I have ever observed in my career, and Derek is the most control-obsessed manager in the tri-state regional market, Ethan explained calmly. The moment those two are left unsupervised with my refined portfolio, they will self-destruct predictably. I've studied both of them for 5 years. I know their cognitive flaws, emotional blind spots, and professional weaknesses better than they know themselves. His prediction would prove devastatingly, perfectly accurate. On the first day of the official handover period, Carter did not bother reading a single page of Ethan's comprehensive documentation. Ethan had spent 3 sleepless nights drafting a 200-page handover deck, tiering all 37 clients by revenue priority, annotating communication styles, hard non-negotiable deadlines, active project milestones, and critical red lines that must never be crossed in stakeholder dialogue. He had done it not out of loyalty to his former firm, but out of unshakable self-respect. Even in professional defeat, he would execute his exit with unassailable, undeniable professionalism. But dignity required a willing recipient to hold weight. Carter opened the deck, scrolled through 2 pages with a dismissive flick of his mouse, then immediately opened social media. He snapped a screenshot of the open portfolio file, posted it to his professional LinkedIn profile with the caption, "Stepping into core client leadership. New professional chapter, let's go victory hand." Derek liked the post within 30 seconds, a public stamp of approval for his nephew's unearned status. Carter spent 15 total seconds reviewing the entire handover document, long enough only to scroll from branded cover to final legal disclaimer page, then launched a multiplayer mobile game and played uninterrupted for the next 3 work hours straight. A junior account coordinator seated nearby hesitated for minutes, then spoke up cautiously to avoid conflict. "Carter, you should really review Ethan's annotated notes. The granular client preference details are make or break for retention this quarter." Carter did not lift his eyes from his glowing screen, his thumbs flying across the display in rapid taps. "What's to review? Client management is just basic phone calls and templated emails. I handled brand partnership outreach at my old MCN internship, way more complex than this basic retail ad work." The coordinator fell silent, knowing any further pushback would land her in Derek's performance review crosshairs. That night, she messaged Ethan privately via encrypted chat. "Carter skimmed your 200-page handover in 15 seconds, then gamed for 3 hours. He doesn't have a single clue what he's managing." Ethan replied with 2 calm, foreknowledge-driven words, "Expected outcome." He was not surprised in the slightest. Carter's problem was not mere technical incompetence. It was delusional overconfidence, nurtured by 5 years of Derek's unearned praise and nepotistic workplace protection. Derek had spent months telling his nephew he possessed natural, innate creative talent, that raw instinct outperformed tedious preparation and documented context. Carter believed it wholeheartedly. He could not fathom that client trust was built incrementally, brick by brick over years, and that replacing a tenured relationship manager would demolish half that foundation instantly. The professional crash arrived faster than Ethan had even anticipated. On the afternoon of the second handover day, Carter placed his first official outreach call to the firm's flagship premium beauty client. The brand's CMO, Sarah Merrill, was 38 years old, sharp-tongued, data-obsessed, and had zero professional tolerance for amateurish incompetence. She had worked with Ethan for 4 uninterrupted years, trusting his strategic judgment implicitly on all national campaign launches and budget allocations. Carter opened the call with a clumsy, rehearsed line he'd copied from a generic client outreach template. "Hi, Ms. Merrill. This is Carter Reed, your new dedicated account lead. Could you send over this week's ad placement schedule when you have a moment?" 3 seconds of dead, hollow silence hummed over the phone line, a cold, oppressive pause that raised the hair on the back of Carter's neck with unspoken corporate displeasure. "What placement schedule?" Sarah's voice was icy, clipped, and dangerously controlled. "Who exactly are you?" Carter stammered through an explanation that he was Ethan's official replacement for all account matters. Sarah's tone dropped another degree, sharp with institutional frustration. Ethan is leaving? When was I formally notified? Standard industry protocol requires a formal email announcement and verbal confirmation call 1 week prior to key account transition. Does your firm not follow its own published client service playbook? Flustered and caught completely off guard, Carter mumbled that he would verify the internal protocol with leadership immediately. A leadership transition is acceptable, Sarah cut him off, unyielding and direct. But before you send any finalized schedules, submit your Q3 performance retrospective and Q4 data-backed optimization proposal. I need tangible proof you can manage this high-value account at the same strategic benchmark Ethan maintained. Match his documented standard exactly. The call ended with a sharp click. Carter froze at his desk, cold panic flaring in his chest. A retrospective? Data-driven optimization proposal? Ethan's rigorous strategic benchmark standard? He had never opened the archived campaign files, had no idea what the prior quarter's core performance metrics were, and could not define strategic audience optimization if his job depended on it. All the critical documents were neatly organized in the shared company server, labeled clearly per Ethan's standardized filing system, searchable in one single click. But Carter did not look them up. He marched straight to Derek's corner office without a second of research. Uncle, the beauty client is demanding a full performance report and strategy deck by end of day. I can't put that together on such short notice. Derek was scrolling real-time stock market data on his dual monitors, barely glancing up from his screen. Push it to the junior creative team. Have one of the entry-level designers draft something quick and generic. It's not a big enough issue to delay your outreach pipeline. She explicitly wants it matching Ethan's strategic standard, Carter stressed, growing anxious. Derek scoffed, finally lifting his head with a dismissive sneer of contempt. Ethan's standard? He overcomplicates every simple deliverable. Writes 30-page analytical decks no client ever fully reads. Throw together a 2-page data summary with branded formatting. As long as it's functionally complete, it'll suffice for her check-in. Functional. Suffice. Those two words formed Derek's entire toxic management philosophy. For years, he had survived his corporate career by embracing deliberate mediocrity, functional campaigns, functional execution, functional vendor kickbacks under the table. He never acknowledged that clients could not distinguish between passable work and exceptional work only because Ethan had spent years secretly elevating all deliverables to a 90% quality benchmark behind the scenes. Now that invisible safety net was permanently gone. Empowered by his uncle's direct directive, Carter pressured the already overloaded creative team for a last-minute favor. Buried under urgent deadlines for a national retail holiday launch, the senior creatives uniformly refused to divert resources. An overwhelmed intern with no strategic branding experience volunteered to help out of fear of disappointing management, cobbling together a 2-page document consisting solely of raw back-end data screenshots, total ad spend, raw impression counts, superficial click-through rates. There was no trend analysis, no root cause performance attribution, no forward-looking optimization strategy, nothing but unprocessed, meaningless numbers pulled directly from the ad platform API. Carter added a branded title header matching the beauty client's color palette, adjusted the font styling, and sent the deck off without a single second of quality review. Sarah Merrill opened the email 60 seconds before the end of her workday. She scanned the attachment for less than 30 seconds before closing it in sharp disgust. She opened her private industry contact list and messaged Ethan instantly. You left without any prior warning to key stakeholders? Ethan replied within 2 seconds, tone neutral and professional. Personal career shift. What's happened on your end? Sarah dialed him on voice call immediately, skipping all formal industry pleasantries. Who is that kid replacing you? He sent a 2-page raw data dump with zero strategic analysis or insight. For years of premium tailored service, and now your firm is sending amateur garbage to their flagship client. Ethan listened silently, letting her vent her professional frustration without interruption or pushback. Sarah, I'm no longer employed there, so I can't officially comment on their internal operations or deliverable standards, he said finally, measured and careful. But if you're exploring strategic partnership options for next year's budget cycle, I know a boutique agency that specializes exclusively in premium consumer brand strategy. Their data-driven work is industry-leading. Would you be open to a low-pressure introduction next week? Sarah laughed dryly on the line, a sound of immediate understanding. She had 15 years of senior marketing leadership experience and recognized the quiet, ethical pivot instantly. Smooth, Ethan. I should have expected nothing less. Let's meet for coffee next Wednesday midday. You set the location. The same destructive scenario replicated itself across Ethan's former portfolio over the next 48 hours without exception. The organic beverage brand's marketing director, a man Ethan had befriended through late-night street food dinners, personal moving help, and emergency hospital referrals for his father's cardiac surgery, received a clueless follow-up call from Carter asking for access to the brand's exclusive proprietary social media campaign templates. The director texted Ethan that night, "Your replacement asked me to send him the campaign templates your firm legally owns. Does he even understand basic IP law? The kid is completely out of his depth and unteachable." The maternity e-commerce brand leader was even more direct and unforgiving. When Carter called to schedule an in-person strategy visit for the upcoming holiday quarter, she replied bluntly, "We only renewed our annual contract last year because of your direct account management. Without your oversight, we're pausing next year's framework contract and opening a formal agency rebid for all verticals." All these complaints, frustrations, and formal termination notices flowed into Ethan's private encrypted channels like a converging river of market sentiment. Carter remained completely oblivious, still spending his afternoons gaming at his desk instead of studying client files. Derek remained equally ignorant, finalizing plans to secure paid positions for 2 more distant relatives within the firm's finance department. Only Ethan saw the full picture, tracking the client portfolio's collapse with quiet, methodical precision. Crucially, he also held knowledge no one else at the firm suspected. For 2 full years, he had been compiling an ironclad evidence dossier detailing Derek's long history of premeditated corporate misconduct, unauthorized vendor kickbacks, inflated project budgets for profit skimming, shell company money laundering, and nepotistic contract routing to privately held businesses owned directly by Derek's spouse. Every transaction was time-stamped, documented with verified bank transfer records, internal OA approval screenshots, and official email audit trails. The total misappropriated amount was traceable to the exact dollar, date, and approving executive signature. This comprehensive evidence was not collected in a rush after his resignation. He had begun compiling it 2 years prior, triggered by a small but pivotal workplace incident that revealed Derek's true moral character. The team had delivered a landmark annual campaign for a luxury automotive client, earning a 95% client satisfaction score for creative excellence and flawless cross-channel execution. In the company-wide announcement celebrating the industry award nomination, Derek named Carter, who had only been on board 2 weeks and contributed nothing beyond ordering catered team snacks, as the lead creator and quarterly top performer. Ethan, the actual lead who had architected, financed, and executed the entire campaign single-handedly, was buried in a tiny footnote listing secondary administrative contributors. From that humiliating day forward, Ethan began documenting every financial and operational irregularity he encountered. He collected budget discrepancies through a trusted long-term ally in the accounting department, cross-referenced hidden vendor relationships masked behind silent proxy owners, and mapped the full corruption network slowly, patiently, without raising the slightest managerial suspicion. He never intended to use the evidence while still employed at the firm. To strike from within would only splatter irreversible collateral damage on his own professional record, triggering internal investigations that would delay his pre-planned exit and Vanguard onboarding. The perfect strategic strike could only land after he was gone, when he held no corporate vulnerabilities Derek could exploit, and Derek harbored zero defensive awareness of the coming reckoning. On the 3rd day of the official handover period, Derek lit the final, irreversible fuse himself. He instructed Carter to send a mass notification email to all 42 active client partners across every vertical. We write to inform you that Ethan Hale has departed the firm for personal career reasons. All account management will transition exclusively to Carter Reed, whose extensive industry experience and professional expertise will deliver enhanced service excellence to your brand moving forward. Extensive industry experience. Enhanced service excellence. Chloe screenshot the email and forwarded it to Ethan immediately, her frustration palpable in her short message. You explicitly documented in your client handover that Carter is unqualified for independent C-suite stakeholder outreach. Derek is lying directly to all revenue-critical clients in writing. Ethan reviewed the screenshot and smiled faintly to himself. This was exactly what he had anticipated. Derek's ego and desperate need to validate his nepotistic decision would force him to make a reckless, professionally fatal misstep. Any seasoned account leader would draft a low-key, transition-focused email emphasizing operational stability and team continuity. Derek chose arrogant grandstanding, publicly erasing Ethan's 5-year legacy and overstating Carter's non-existent qualifications solely to feed his own pride. It was a catastrophic breach of professional communication etiquette, born purely of unchecked institutional arrogance. That single email became the official turning point for the entire client portfolio. At 3 p.m. sharp that day, Ethan placed 3 anonymous calls using a newly purchased burner SIM card with no linked personal data to a specialized corporate governance law firm, an investigative financial journalism outlet with a focus on ad industry corruption, and a senior executive recruiter with deep cross-agency connections. Speaking only as a former tenured employee with no vested ongoing interest in his old firm, he outlined systemic governance issues, referencing specific case files, exact monetary figures, and organizational vulnerabilities without sharing a single internal document. The investigative journalist followed up immediately via encrypted messaging. Your tip aligns with our ongoing ad industry governance beat. Can you share supporting documentation for verification? Ethan replied carefully and legally. I possess no illegally obtained internal files. All verifiable evidence is stored within the firm's public-facing operational systems, accessible via official audit protocols. Monitor imminent leadership terminations and client portfolio departures for independent confirmation. He never shared a single document directly. That would be reckless, legally perilous, and traceable. He only pointed the trained, licensed investigator toward the existing evidence trail. The professional would uncover the full proof independently, cleanly, and within legal boundaries. Detonation arrived promptly the following business morning. 9:47 a.m., the first formal contract termination email landed in corporate legal's inbox, originating from the maternity e-commerce brand. Polite but legally unyielding, due to material uncertainty surrounding key account leadership restructuring, we are terminating the 2026 annual framework contract and initiating a full open agency rebid process. 9:52 a.m., the second arrived from Sarah Merrill's premium beauty brand. Shorter, colder, and contractually definitive, deficient service quality from newly assigned leadership triggers Clause 4.7 of our Master Service Agreement. We terminate all partnership effective immediately, with no renewal eligibility. 10:21 a.m., the organic beverage brand submitted the third termination notice, attaching Carter's 2-page raw data dump highlighted in red ink across every section. Core official complaint. Material breakdown in strategic advisory capacity has eroded irreparable brand confidence in firm leadership. By 5 p.m. that day, 7 of the firm's top 10 revenue-generating clients had submitted formal contract termination notices via verified legal channels. The remaining 3 senior brand stakeholders were completely unresponsive to calls and emails, their annual framework contracts effectively in limbo pending internal review. Then came the final, crushing blow that collapsed Derek's career entirely. At 3 p.m. precisely, an encrypted anonymous email was dispatched simultaneously to the CEO, General Counsel, HR Director, and 2 independent external board members. The subject line contained 2 concise words, Derek Howard, Governance Breach Audit. The body read, The below evidence is redundantly backed up across 3 secure cloud storage servers. Please initiate official corporate verification immediately. The attachment was a 46-page professionally formatted PDF audit report. The document was perfectly structured, hyperlinked, and chronologically organized into 6 irrefutable source sections. 1. 3 years of fraudulent vendor enrichment. For contracted creative agencies, 1 legally registered under Derek's spouse's legal name, 3 held through anonymous silent proxy holders. Included side-by-side market rate comparisons showing 32% inflated pricing across all contracts, signed approval timestamps, and Derek's executive authorization signatures for every overpriced work order. 2. Budget inflation and contract splitting to bypass mandatory third-party procurement oversight protocols. Total documented misappropriation verified via financial logs, $338,000. 3. Retaliatory performance review manipulation over 3 consecutive fiscal years. Attached cross-reference spreadsheets linking verified client satisfaction scores, highest for Ethan's team across all verticals, against final HR-approved performance ratings, consistently lowest for Ethan's team, proving punitive grading for non-obedient employees. 4. Unauthorized core project outsourcing to family-owned entities, with before and after client satisfaction trend lines proving measurable service degradation post-transfer to Derek's wife's shell agencies. 5. Carter Reed's fraudulent onboarding process. His resume contained fabricated industry experience claims, his interview evaluation forms were incomplete and unsigned, and his probationary performance metrics failed minimum firm hiring thresholds. All official requirements waived exclusively via Derek's direct executive override with no secondary approval. 6. Intentional deceptive client communication during account handover. The mass email claiming Carter's extensive industry experience was attached as Exhibit A, with verified factual annotation. Carter possessed 0 prior full-time advertising industry experience, only 2 months of uncredited MCN internship support work. Most devastating of all, every single piece of evidence was pulled solely from legally accessible internal company records, OA workflow logs, financial reimbursement archives, HR personnel files, and externally sent email archives stored on the firm's compliance servers. Nothing was hacked, stolen, leaked, or obtained illegally. The anonymous sender had merely compiled existing, system-stored digital traces into an unbreakable chain of individual and corporate culpability. The CEO's executive suite remained closed and locked all evening. A long, heavy silence permeated the floor, followed by raised, heated phone conversations with legal counsel and board members. At 7 p.m. sharp, Derek was summoned inside the restricted executive office suite. Witnesses later shared that Derek entered the room fully expecting to discuss client attrition, ready to deploy his usual excuses of post-pandemic market downturns and unrealistic brand stakeholder expectations. He had used those exact excuses successfully for years to avoid accountability. This time, no one asked about the lost clients at all. The CEO dropped the printed PDF stack, an inch thick with highlighted exhibits, on the polished conference table. Derek's face strained from flushed red to ashen white in 3 seconds flat. He attempted to stammer out denials and deflection, but the CEO cut him off completely before he could finish his first sentence. The 20-minute closed-door meeting that followed left Derek visibly shattered, his professional reputation and corporate authority annihilated on the spot. The next business morning, a company-wide email was distributed to all staff. Derek Howard is placed on indefinite administrative leave pending full internal audit review. Carter Reed's voluntary resignation was processed within 24 hours per his request. His workstation was stripped clean by end of day, all personal effects disposed of by janitorial staff. The Sansevieria plant he had neglected until its leaves yellowed, wilted, and died within 3 days of ownership was discarded into the building's compost bin. The internal audit team completed their formal forensic review in 2 business days, confirming all core allegations and revising the total misappropriated funds upward to $423,000 after tracing hidden subsidiary transactions. The legal department unanimously recommended criminal prosecution for corporate embezzlement and wire fraud. After lengthy board deliberation, the CEO formally approved the full police referral. Within a week, the regional industry landscape shifted irreversibly. The two external vendors implicated in the kickback scheme were subpoenaed for formal sworn questioning by forensic investigators. One immediately provided a full witness statement detailing the years of structured bribe and kickback protocols orchestrated exclusively by Derek. Meanwhile, Vanguard Interactive's competitive rebid calendar filled rapidly with high-value opportunities from the defected client roster. Sarah Merrill's premium beauty brand was the first to schedule an official strategy session. She toured Vanguard's bright, open-concept riverfront offices and spoke with Alara for over an hour, locking in rebid terms and evaluation criteria on the spot. As they exited the glass conference room overlooking the water, she clapped Ethan on the shoulder with a knowing grin. "This space has honest, natural light, unlike your old building. That gray, oppressive tower always felt like it was architected to suffocate ambition and reward mediocrity." The organic beverage brand followed within 48 hours, prioritizing Vanguard over 3 larger competing agencies. The maternity e-commerce brand skipped the entire competitive rebid process entirely, signing a direct annual framework contract with Vanguard at a 25% higher retainer than their previous agreement with Ethan's old firm. At the formal signing reception, the brand founder raised her crystal wine glass to Alara. "Your team demonstrates a depth of human-centric market understanding no other agency in the region can match." Alara smiled faintly and glanced sideways at Ethan, saying nothing to credit his behind-the-scenes influence. 3 weeks later, Ethan worked late at Vanguard's 28th floor headquarters. Whiteboards covering the open office walls were covered in brainstorming keywords, campaign frameworks, and granular audience insight matrices. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the city's evening traffic flowed like a river of golden light along the waterfront highway. His fully recovered Sansevieria plant sat in a hand-glazed ceramic planter near the communal breakout area, its leaves thick, glossy, and vibrant once more under soft LED grow lighting. His work phone vibrated quietly on the desk. Chloe's message appeared on screen. "Final forensic audit report released to the board. Confirmed fraud total $423,000. Formal criminal police report officially filed this afternoon." Ethan replied with a single calm line, "Understood. Thank you for the update." A second message popped up immediately beneath it. "Also, Carter added me on LinkedIn earlier today. Asked if Vanguard has entry-level openings, said he's willing to start as an unpaid intern to learn the industry basics." I didn't reply and blocked his profile. Ethan stared at the name on his screen for a long moment, recalling the vivid image of Carter leaning back in his old polished leather chair, arrogant and unearned confidence radiating from his relaxed posture the day Ethan resigned. Carter had thought he'd won the career lottery the moment he occupied that hard-earned seat. He never realized the moment he took possession, his professional career had already begun its irreversible, self-inflicted slide. The privileged pathway his uncle had paved for him was built entirely on Derek's crumbling professional integrity and corrupt corporate foundation. Carter's lifelong confusion was inevitable. He would never understand why his superficial client outreach and templated reports triggered catastrophic contract terminations. Derek had simplified his entire worldview to one dangerous phrase: "Good enough is always sufficient." His nephew became the perfect cautionary tale for that toxic mindset, a living example of how unearned privilege destroys potential. Ethan typed a polite, professional reply draft, then deleted it completely. He sent nothing at all. Some people do not deserve a second professional chance. When a person's first instinct upon receiving another's life's work is to boast about the status it grants them rather than honor the effort that created it, no amount of mentorship or opportunity will ever change their core character. The door closes permanently, and it is better left shut without explanation. He reopened his encrypted chat with Alara. "I have a full data-backed strategy to turn our 3 newly signed brands into national industry case studies next quarter. Initial deck drafted. Let's refine tomorrow morning." Alara replied instantly, her signature efficiency evident. 8 a.m. sharp. Main riverfront conference room. Bring your inside appendix. Ethan walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the nighttime skyline stretching across the river. From 28 stories up, he could clearly see his former office building 18 floors below on the adjacent avenue. The lights in Derek's old corner executive office were dark, vacant, and permanently unoccupied. He did not need to double-check to know they would never be lit by Derek again. Industry critics would later call him ruthless, unforgiving, lacking basic professional mercy. Ethan did not care about external perception. Dignity was not an inherent right granted by kindness or seniority. It was a currency earned through consistent action, integrity, and accountability. Derek had believed dignity came from executive authority, from belittling subordinates to elevate himself, from dismissing dedicated 5-year work as trivial loose ends. Ethan had returned dignity to its rightful place, tied to proven competence, relational integrity, and consistent value delivery to partners. The clients who departed the old firm did not see themselves as stolen property or poached assets. As seasoned, rational business leaders, they simply followed the natural flow of professional value across the market. Commercial loyalty was never personal. It always followed proven capability and trust. He returned to his desk and opened his black leather notebook to a blank fresh page. On the final page, written the night before he submitted his resignation email, was a single handwritten line: "All dignity must be earned." He picked up his premium fountain pen and added a second line beneath it: "Firm and deliberate. Earned. Now onward to build more." Outside, the city lights dimmed as midnight approached, the river glinting softly under street lamp reflection. Ethan turned off his desk lamp and walked toward the exit, the illuminated Vanguard logo glowing softly on the brushed metal wall beside the glass door. For the first time in 5 exhausting years, he did not feel the quiet urge to glance backward at his past. The next morning, Alara arrived early to find a new organizational chart drawn across the main conference room whiteboard in crisp black marker. A new division header read, "Enterprise Client Solutions." Beneath it sat 4 specialized teams: strategy, creative, client partnerships, data analytics. The leadership roles were already filled with verified names. 2 entries stopped Alara midstep: Martha Gaines as Senior Creative Director and a lead copywriter who had been marginalized under Derek's regime for refusing to prioritize managerial obedience over creative quality. She messaged Ethan instantly, "You recruited Martha overnight? When did you lock that confidential offer in?" "Last night after the audit went public," Ethan replied. She reached out privately the second the board alert dropped. Brings 3 senior creatives with her, all top-tier talent suppressed at the old firm. Alara sent a thumbs-up emoji with a short note: "Best talent acquisition move we could make." Well played. 3 days later, a new row of workstations was installed beside Vanguard's west-facing sunlit windows. Martha and her hand-picked creative team occupied the desks, already deep into drafting campaign concepts for the new high-value client roster. Chloe claimed the workstation nearest the main entrance, a small potted green spider plant sitting beside her monitor to replace the Sansevieria she'd admired at the old office. Ethan's original mature Sansevieria remained in the communal breakout space, officially labeled as shared greenery for the entire team to nurture. 1 week later, Alara announced the quarterly financial results at the all-management leadership meeting. The newly launched Enterprise Client Solutions division had secured 5 premium client contracts in its first 30 days of operation, totaling $8.4 million USD in guaranteed annual recurring revenue. After the formal meeting adjourned, Alara pulled Ethan aside into the quiet, sunlit hallway overlooking the river. Warm morning sunlight streamed across the polished concrete floor between them, soft and golden. "That 46-page audit document you compiled," Alara said, her tone measured and analytical. "It was masterfully constructed. Perfect chronological timeline, airtight evidence chain, completely objective legal wording. You used Derek's own stored system logs, his repeated management mistakes, his internal approval protocols to bury him without leaving a single forensic fingerprint tracing back to you. I only systematically documented what he chose to leave exposed over years, Ethan replied simply. Ilara's eyes sharpened with quiet insight. You knew Carter would become unavoidable collateral damage when you set this entire plan in motion. Ethan paused for one beat, acknowledging the unvarnished truth without deflection or guilt. Carter's professional failures were entirely self-inflicted. I never manipulated his decisions, altered his client documents, or influenced his outreach communications in any way. The brand terminations were direct results of his demonstrated incompetence, evaluated objectively by impartial professional clients per contractual standards. The non-negotiable responsibility to assess his qualifications before account assignment belonged solely to Derek, his direct supervisor and blood relative. That burden was never mine to carry or mitigate. Ilara nodded slowly, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. You appear gentle, accommodating, and softly spoken to everyone around you. But when the stakes matter most, you are colder and more disciplined than anyone I know in this industry. You told me that exact thing 3 years ago, Ethan reminded her quietly. Ilara blinked in surprise, then laughed softly with fond recollection. She remembered the conversation clearly. The day she left her old 4A firm to launch Vanguard, Ethan had asked why she refused to take him along as a founding team member back then. She had told him plainly, "You are not cold enough yet." In this cutthroat industry, unchecked sentimentality will get you eaten alive by corrupt systems and ruthless people. Now he had learned the lesson completely, turning discipline into strength rather than cruelty. At the far end of the hallway, the team mounted a massive new dry erase whiteboard spanning the full wall width. In bold black marker, they wrote the official Q4 company target: secure 7 new enterprise clients, total quarterly revenue exceed $12 million. Ethan picked up a red dry erase marker and added a single plus symbol after the number 7, raising the ambition intentionally. He glanced sideways toward Ilara. She leaned against the polished wall, returning his gaze with a silent, approving thumbs up, aligned in their shared vision. The old chapter of humiliation, corruption, and quiet survival was closed forever. The next chapter, built on earned dignity, trusted partnership, and intentional growth, had officially begun.